now live from College Green outside Westminster, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg, former Conservative Government Minister. A very, very good afternoon to you, Sir Jacob.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me on.
Well, thank you for joining us. I must ask you, first of all, I mean, so much to talk about in terms of world affairs, but a lot of it actually does come back to Britain. The Chinese embassy in the East End of London basically said no, said the local authority, no, said the local people. The government has taken it on. They have now approved that mega embassy, despite the fact that MI5 and GCHQ directors have written to the Home Secretary and the Foreign Secretary saying it is, quote, not realistic to expect to be able wholly to eliminate each and every potential risk, they say, linked to that new London embassy, close to important cables right next to the city. What do you make of that decision?
Well, I think all embassies are inevitably a risk and are used for spying, and we probably use our embassies for spying too. So one shouldn't be too squeamish about the reality of diplomacy, but I think it is unconscionable to give permission to China for anything as long as Jimmy Lai is still in prison. Jimmy Lai is a British citizen who never had any Chinese citizenship, who is locked up in Hong Kong for exercising a right to free speech that China promised the people of Hong Kong would have for 50 years after we left in 1997. And I think it's really awful that the government's doing so little about Jimmy Lai whilst kowtowing to China in terms of planning permission.
It's interesting that Jimmy Lai is not a priority as a British citizen, but apparently El Fattah was a priority as a dual Egyptian-British citizen who had been very, very open, I mean, all over social media about his hatred of Britain, of Jews, of anyone in the West, and wanting to kill us and our military and our police. But the Foreign Office spent an awful lot of time trying to get El Fattah out of prison in Egypt and brought back here to Britain, but not so much with a British national in Hong Kong who's simply fighting for freedom.
You're quite right. So the Foreign Office kowtows to China and brings Britain haters here. It's really a very stupid approach to foreign policy, and we should do absolutely nothing for China until Jimmy Lai is free. We have a duty to him and the people of Hong Kong. Hong Kong was handed over to China in a deal that the Chinese have broken, and we should not be dealing with them in an ordinary way unless they follow the joint declaration and the agreement that they made.
Why do we? Because, you know, under previous Tory regimes, under, you know, David Cameron and George Osborne, they were quite happy to deal with China. I mean, literally, have a pint with Xi Jinping in the pub, get Huawei to run our 5G network, no questions at all. Because although I think the decision is an absolutely dire decision, I've got a funny feeling the Tories might have done the same if they were still in power. We've had a number of callers. They've talked about this being treachery, treason, motivated by stupidity and malignancy. Do you think any of that is true?
Well, I think it depends on the Tories, to answer your first point, that Tom Tugendhat and Ian Duncan-Smith have both been sanctioned by China, both of them influential within the Conservative Party. There was the Cameron desire to have a new relationship with China, but I think that's been seen through. It's also worth bearing in mind that China has changed under Xi Jinping. It's gone back to a more Maoist style of government and a more hostile style of government to the West. Following Deng Xiaoping as opening up, China was becoming a country that it did make sense to deal with. And over the last 15 years, it's become quite clear that that isn't working anymore. Would the Conservatives have done the same? I very much hope not. Have some of your callers made some brilliant and eloquent points? Yes, indeed, I heard one or two of them whilst I was standing here earlier.
Well, indeed, but worry. I mean, you could say the same, a lot of people would say, over the Chagos Islands. And although, again, the talks were carrying on under the Conservatives for a long time, they were kind of kicked into the long grass. And pretty much the top priority, apparently, in his intro when Keir Starmer came into office, at the behest of his Attorney General, Lord Herman, who seems to have some bizarre sort of power over him, was to basically hand over the Chagos Islands to the Mauritians and pay them for the privilege of leasing back our own territory, including the Diego Garcia base. Donald Trump, it seems, has finally woken up, despite the White House previously agreeing to this, this madness, and says Keir Starmer, in a Truth Social post overnight, accused him of giving away the Chagos Islands, and he says his words, for no reason whatsoever, in what he called an act of great stupidity. Do you think that there is a possibility now of a US veto, and would that stop this from going ahead?
Well, I would hope so, because Obviously, the US military base at Diego Garcia is very important to the United States. Again, this ties in with China because Mauritius is a sycophant to China, gets money from China, sucks up to the Chinese state. And you would be giving sovereign control over Chagos to a Chinese acolyte, and that cannot be in the interests of Western security. It's a pity that Donald Trump hasn't concentrated more on Chagos and a bit less on Greenland, because Chagos seems to me to be an immediate present risk by really eye-wateringly stupid policy. Not only are we giving something away that we own outright and getting it back on a less secure basis, but we're paying billions of pounds for the privilege, and there are conflicts of interest within the government. All sorts of Keir Starmer's legal friends seems to have been getting their snouts in the trough and getting fees for all of this. I'm very suspicious of what's been going on.
I hate to use that word suspicious. You mentioned Greenland there. Let's just touch briefly on the Greenland situation, because Donald Trump ain't backing down. He wants to go ahead with these tariffs that would hit the EU, well, a number of NATO, 7 NATO states and us. There's talk about, retaliatory tariffs from the EU as well. There's trade bazooka over the US tech companies. Lots of talk about, could there, there's meeting in Davos, could there be perhaps a G7 summit in Paris? It's what Macron has asked for in a message to Donald Trump, starting "my friend," which Donald Trump decided to post publicly. Do you think this can all be resolved without tariff war, without military invasion?
Well, I'm sure it can be resolved without a military invasion. I don't think Donald Trump wants to go to war with NATO or with Denmark particularly. I mean, he'd obviously win the war if he went to it, but it would destroy any semblance of global ability to get things done if he did. It would be a wrecking ball to cooperation between states. It's a useful reminder that Donald Trump is the President of the United States and wants to make America great again. He doesn't care about anyone else.
True.
And I want leaders in this country who want to make Britain great again and put our interests first. I think we should learn from Trump, and we should be more certain about our own interests rather than always putting the interests of foreign nations first.
I think a lot of my audience would be agreeing with that. So which is the leader who will make Britain great again? Is it Kemi Badenoch, the current Conservative leader, or is it Nigel Farage, the Reform leader?
Well, it's a very good question. I want the right to unite, and I think we should go into an election with a coupon, and then whichever one of them had the most members of Parliament should become Prime Minister.
So vote for your party that you want, whether it's the Conservatives or Reform, and give them the biggest clout in any deal. But if there isn't a majority for one of those, overall majority for one of those parties, that there is already an agreement from the electorate, effectively, who voted for them, they will accept there will be some sort of coalition.
There's almost no ideological difference between the Conservative Party and Reform. It's very hard to point to anything other than minor policy differentials between Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage. And one or two things that Nigel did disagree on, he's now changed his mind about. So he's no longer in favour of proportional representation and so forth. So,
no party is doing well in the polls.
Working together.
Jacob, you know perfectly well, no party that's doing well in the polls is ever in favour of PR, and neither is any party that gets into office. That's literally the whole thing. It's about having a voting system that helps you.
Indeed. You're remarkably cynical today.
I am very cynical today. Have you seen the news today? What do you make of Kemi Badenoch after 3 defections? Okay, one a former minister, you would have served with him in office, Nadeem Zahawi, one a shadow cabinet member, the shadow justice secretary, as was Robert Jenrick, and then also shadow foreign office minister as well, Andrew Rossendale. Moving over, Kemi Badenoch wrote to Tory MPs and spoke to them last night, warning them she will not tolerate any more psychodrama from shadow ministers, saying anyone who wants to undermine or destroy the party will be dealt with. Is that the best way to unite her troops at this time?
I think tonally that Robert Jenrick's comments about Mel Stride and Priti Patel were inelegant, and I think tonally this type of letter is inelegant. It is not the way I would do it. Then I'm rather an admirer of Harold Macmillan's approach to public affairs. So when he lost his whole Treasury team, he said he was going to look at the broader Commonwealth horizon and ignore little local difficulties. I think leaders need to rise above immediate spats rather than becoming cross about them. I don't think that works very well in terms of PR.
Well, especially if you're down in the doldrums in the polls. Now, we see Keir Starmer is also, I mean, he's lost even more.
Well, we are going up a bit, actually. To be fair to Kemi, sorry to interrupt, but to be fair to Kemi, she is going up a bit, and her own ratings are going up.
Absolutely.
And Nigel has stalled a bit. I mean, the polls aren't as one way as they were for most of last year.
No, 100%. I think we've all been giving her, Kemi Badenoch, some very good ratings for PMQs, for sort. I thought she actually played a blinder in basically sacking Robert Jenrick, as she did when she found out he was going to defect, so basically pulled the carpet from under him. But it's interesting that Keir Starmer's ratings are continuing down. He's got 75% negative approval. Extraordinarily, there are still 18% of people in this country who have a positive approval of him. I'd love to know who those people are. But do you think that basically it's all to play for in the next few years before a general election? Because a lot of people are going, it's going to be a reform government, Keir Starmer's out, end of. Probably Keir Starmer may be out even after the local elections. You've been around in politics a long time, so have I in political journalism. Do you think that actually things aren't quite as settled as some people might claim?
Things are never as settled. Think of the Canadian election, where Mark Carney was able to win because Donald Trump threatened to annex Canada, and the Conservatives, who were way ahead, looked certain to get a large majority, suddenly collapsed. Yep. With things like Greenland coming into play, that's quite difficult for Nigel Farage, who's been so close to Donald Trump, when Donald Trump is actively hostile to British interests. So things can be overturned. I did have one thought as you were going through the polling. Do you think the people who still like Keir Starmer are the ones who are still in support of the former Prince Andrew? I wonder if there's any overlap between the two groups.
There are still people who give him a positive rating. I wonder if you counted up 18%, is that the number of people who are currently on welfare or in a public sector job? I mean, you know, that may well account for it all.
Are they?
Just finally, I must ask you, I mean, Nigel Farage gave the 7th of May deadline. That's the day of the local, the Scottish and Welsh elections. That's it. You have to have basically defected to reform by then, whether you're a former Tory MP, former minister. Although you're in a very noisy building site, Westminster, right now, you're no longer an MP and no longer a government minister. Have you thought at all about defecting?
I would say to you what I said to you before. You go to GB News and then I'll think about going to reform. Oh, God,
let's start that again. Right, we're ending it now. So Jacob Rees-Mogg, he's always told not to do it, but he does it anyway. So Jacob Rees-Mogg, former Conservative government minister, thank you very much, from a very, very noisy Westminster. Apologies for that background noise. Thank you for that. Philip Ingram, it is interesting. You talk about leaders should want to make Britain great again. Also interesting to talk about that, the right to unite. Basically, yes. Look, we're running on our own policies, we're our own people, we want to have a formal majority. In the event that we don't, we're not going to let this so-called, I hate that I use the word progressive alliance of the left. Give me a break. I mean, they're not progressive. They're absolute extremist nutters. The Green Party is a full-on communist, net zero, grind us into the dirt, put us back in caves, not a party. Yeah. I think there's an awful lot of people who would, on the right wing, centre and right, who would go for that.
100%. And as we said, it's Thatcher's policy that Reform are following. And if ever there was someone who showed a perfect way of sitting on the fence between being Tory or being Reform, Jacob has just given us a masterclass linguistically. Yeah, he's got one foot on each side.
A lot of us thought Robert Jenrick was sitting there as well, but he definitely had to jump aside. Very interesting.
Jacob is definitely 1 foot in each camp.
Right.